The night Damien and I broke up, I felt nothing but relief. It had been 3 years of emotional whiplash, 3 years of walking on eggshells, of shrinking myself to avoid his jealousy, of apologizing for things I hadn't done wrong. 3 years of being told I was too sensitive whenever his words cut too deep. 3 years of believing that maybe he was right, maybe I was lucky to have him, maybe this was as good as it would get for someone like me. That night, after yet another fight about something trivial, he looked me dead in the eyes and said the words that would eventually set me free. "You'll never find someone like me. You'll never do better than this." He said it almost proudly, like he was doing me a favor by letting me know my market value, like I should be grateful for the reality check. I remember looking at him, this man who had slowly chipped away at my confidence for years, and feeling a strange sense of clarity wash over me. "I know," I replied quietly. "That's the point." His face contorted with confusion, then anger. He wasn't used to me standing my ground. I usually backpedaled, apologized, did whatever it took to smooth things over. But something had finally snapped inside me. "What's that supposed to mean?" he demanded. I took a deep breath. "It means I don't want someone like you. I don't want someone who makes me feel small, who makes me question my worth, who thinks telling me I'll never do better is some kind of compliment." "Oh, so now I'm the bad guy?" His voice rose. "After everything I've done for you, you'd be nothing without me." Maybe a few months earlier, those words would have sent me into a spiral of doubt. That night, they only confirmed what I already knew. I needed to leave. "I'm done, Damien." My voice was steady. "This relationship isn't healthy for either of us." "Fine," he scoffed. "Leave, but don't come crawling back when you realize what you've thrown away." I didn't say anything else. I just packed a bag with essentials, called my sister to come get me, and walked out the door. As I waited on the curb for her to arrive, I could almost feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I could breathe. The first few weeks after the breakup were a strange mix of liberation and fear. I moved in with my sister temporarily, started looking for my own place, and tried to figure out who I was outside of Damien's shadow. He texted constantly at first, alternating between angry accusations, tearful apologies, and thinly veiled threats about how I'd regret leaving him. I didn't respond to any of them. I'd said everything I needed to say the night I walked out. Eventually, the texts slowed, then stopped altogether. I heard through mutual friends that he was telling everyone I'd have a wake-up call soon and come back begging for another chance, that I was nothing special and would realize how good I'd had it with him. I deleted social media for a while. Not because I was afraid of seeing his posts, but because I needed space to heal without an audience. I needed to remember who I was before him, before I became this anxious, apologetic version of myself that I barely recognized. I started small. I went back to the yoga classes I'd given up because Damien thought they were a waste of time. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with because he didn't like them. I dyed my hair the bright copper color he'd always vetoed as too attention-seeking. Every small decision felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, like remembering that I was allowed to exist loudly, to take up space, to have opinions that differed from his. About 3 months after the breakup, I met Eli at a local bookstore. I wasn't looking for a relationship. In fact, the idea of dating again terrified me. But there was something about his quiet confidence, the way he actually listened when I spoke, that drew me in. We started as friends. He recommended books. I suggested films. We talked about everything and nothing. He told me about his passion for teaching high school English, about his close-knit family, about the year he spent backpacking through Europe after college. I shared my love for photography, my complicated relationship with my parents, my dream of one day opening a small gallery. The difference was stark and immediate. With Damien, I'd constantly edited myself, presenting only the parts I thought he'd approve of. With Eli, I found myself just being. And he seemed to like the real me, all of me, not just the convenient parts. 6 months post-breakup, Eli and I started dating officially. By then, I'd secured a better job, moved into my own apartment, and begun to rebuild my confidence. I wasn't perfect. I still flinched sometimes when disagreements arose, waiting for the verbal lashing that never came. I still occasionally apologized for things that weren't my fault, but I was healing. I didn't post about my new relationship online, not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't need external validation to know that what we had was good, real, healthy. Of course, news travels fast in small social circles. About 8 months after Damien and I broke up, and 2 months into my relationship with Eli, my phone lit up with a text from a number I'd never fully been able to delete. "Hey, I've been thinking about you. Let's talk." I stared at Damien's message for a long moment. There was a time when those words would have sent my heart racing, when I would have dropped everything to respond, to fix whatever was wrong, to make him happy again. But that girl was gone. I simply reacted to his message with a thumbs up emoji and set my phone down. No explanation, no lengthy response, just acknowledgement and dismissal in one tiny gesture. My phone immediately started ringing. Damien calling. I declined it and put my phone on silent. Later that evening, I checked my messages to find a barrage from him. Really, a thumbs up. After everything we went through, we need to talk. For real. I've changed. I've been working on myself. I heard you're with someone new. Is that true? You know he can't possibly understand you like I do. Just give me a chance to show you how different things could be. Each message more desperate than the last. It was like he couldn't comprehend that I wasn't playing hard to get. I was genuinely done. I didn't respond to any of them. There was nothing left to say. The next day, my sister called. "So, Damien cornered me at the grocery store," she said without preamble. I sighed. "What did he want?" "Information about you, obviously. He asked if you were really dating someone new. When I said yes, he got this weird look on his face and asked if it was serious." "What did you tell him?" "I told him it wasn't his business anymore," she replied. "He didn't like that." "I'm sure he didn't. He said, and I'm quoting here, she'll realize she made a mistake. No one will ever love her the way I did." I couldn't help but laugh. "He's right about that, thankfully." My sister chuckled. "That's what I told him. I said, God, I hope not. She deserves so much better than that." He stormed off after that. After we hung up, I thought about Damien's words. Asterisk. No one will ever love her the way I did. Once that would have sounded romantic to me. Now I recognized it for what it was. A threat disguised as devotion. A reminder that his version of love came with conditions, with control, with the constant fear of not being enough. The text continued for a while, sometimes angry, sometimes pleading. I never responded beyond that initial thumbs up. Eventually they tapered off, and I hoped, that maybe he'd finally accepted that it was over. Then came the night of my gallery showing. After years of working as a photographer on the side, I had finally gathered enough courage to display my work publicly. It was a small venue, nothing fancy, but it represented a dream I'd nearly abandoned during my relationship with Damien. He'd always subtly discouraged my photography, suggesting it was a nice hobby, but not something to take seriously. Eli had been incredibly supportive, helping me select prints, frame them, and even manage the logistics of the event. My friends and family showed up in force, filling the small gallery with warmth and excitement. I was in the middle of explaining one of my pieces to an interested couple when I felt a shift in the room's energy. I looked up to see Damien standing by the entrance, looking strangely out of place in a suit that seemed one size too small. My stomach dropped, but I excused myself politely from the conversation and walked over to him before he could make his way further into the room. "Damien," I said, keeping my voice neutral, "this is a surprise." He smiled, that charming smile that had once made my heart flutter and now only set off warning bells. "I heard about your big night. Thought I'd come support you." "That's not necessary," I replied. "We're not in each other's lives anymore." His smile faltered, just slightly. "Come on, Riley. Don't be like that. I'm just trying to be friendly." Being friendly would have been respecting my boundaries when I made it clear I didn't want to talk. He glanced around the gallery, taking in the photographs, the crowd, the small red dots indicating sales next to several pieces. Something dark flashed across his face. "So this is why you've been ignoring me? You've been too busy playing artist?" I fought the urge to explain myself, to defend my work, to prove its value. That was the old pattern, the old me. Instead, I simply said, "I think you should go." "Is he here?" Damien asked, ignoring my statement. "Your new boyfriend?" As if on cue, Eli appeared at my side, not touching me, but close enough to offer support. He didn't say anything, just stood there calmly. Damien looked him up and down, a dismissive smirk forming. "This is what you replaced me with? Seriously?" Before I could respond, a gallery employee approached. "Is everything okay here?" she asked, giving Damien a pointed look. "Everything's fine," I said. "My ex was just leaving." Damien's face flushed with anger or embarrassment, maybe both. For a moment, I thought he might cause a scene, might reveal the volatile personality that lurked beneath his polished exterior. But instead, he straightened his tie, gave me one last look, and said quietly, "You'll regret this. He's not enough for you." Then he turned and walked out. Eli looked at me, concern in his eyes. "You okay?" I took a deep breath and realized, surprisingly, that I was. Better than okay, actually. "Yes," I said, "I really am. The rest of the night was a success. I sold several pieces, made connections with local art enthusiasts, and even had a small write-up in the community paper the following week. But more importantly, I'd faced Damien and hadn't crumbled, hadn't doubted myself, hadn't slipped back into the pattern of appeasing him at my own expense. I'd moved on, not just in terms of finding someone new, but in rediscovering my worth independent of anyone else's validation. A few days after the gallery showing, I received one last text from Damien. "I still think you're making a mistake, but I get it now. I wasn't good to you. I'm sorry. I hope he makes you happy in a way I couldn't." I stared at the message for a long time, surprised by what seemed like genuine remorse. Part of me wanted to respond, to acknowledge the apology, to offer some kind of closure. But the wiser part of me recognized that engaging further would only open a door I'd worked hard to close. Some relationships aren't meant to be salvaged, even as friendships. Some people are meant to be chapters, not ongoing characters in your story. So I did the only thing that felt right. I deleted the message, then blocked his number for good. That night, as Eli and I cooked dinner in my small kitchen, him chopping vegetables while I stirred a simmering sauce, music playing softly in the background, I caught myself smiling for no particular reason, just happiness, bubbling up unprompted. "What's that smile about?" he asked, nudging me gently with his shoulder. I thought about Damien's words the night we broke up. "You'll never find someone like me. You'll never do better than this." "Just thinking about how right my ex was," I said. Eli raised an eyebrow, confused. "He told me I'd never find someone like him," I explained. "And he was right. I found someone so much better." Eli laughed, pulling me into a hug. His loss, my gain. As we stood there in my kitchen, I thought about how far I'd come from that night on the curb, waiting for my sister with a hastily packed bag and a heart full of doubt. How I'd rebuilt myself piece by piece. How I'd learned that walking away from something familiar, even when it's harmful, takes more courage than staying. Sometimes the most empowering thing you can do isn't finding the perfect comeback or extracting revenge. Sometimes it's simply moving on, living well, and meaning it when you send that thumbs up emoji. Because nothing says "I've moved on" quite like the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth and isn't looking back. Let me know what you think in the comments below.